right, so we are going to start with the bones of the skull. So this first bone you're going to come to in the front is a frontal bone. Makes sense, right? And then as we move to the top of the head, we'll see there's these two bones here called the parietal bones. Now you'll also notice that there's this marking called a suture that joins two bones together. So as you're developing, these are separate bones, and then as you grow, those grow into place. So this is the coronal suture, and if you remember your planes, that makes sense because this is a coronal or a frontal plane. So that's your coronal suture. Then between your two parietal bones is another suture, and this is called the sagittal suture, which again makes sense because that's the sagittal plane. Okay, moving to the very back. Guess I should flip them over for you. There you go. At the very back is the occipital bone, okay, which you should know from your regions. That's the occipital region. And then this suture here is the lambdoid suture. Then if we go over to the side, we'll get to your temporal bone, and it goes all the way around here. Okay, think of your temple. And the suture that surrounds your temporal bone is a squamous suture. So he kind of looks like a flat pancake like our squamous cells do. Okay, then over here to the front, this bone here, your cheekbone, is your zygomatic bone. And then the majority of, the front of your face here is the maxilla. Then as we get into the eye, okay, the back here is the sphenoid bone. And then the side, up here's the ethmoid bone. We'll see more of the sphenoid and the ethmoid when we take the top off. You can also see the ethmoid bone up here in the top of the nose. Okay, the next bone you get to is the lacrimal bone. And he's right here, he has the lacrimal fossa, which you don't have to know, but it may help you see where the lacrimal bone is. Okay, lacrimal has to do with tears. So that's where your lacrimal duct is, or your tear duct. Okay, then around here to the front of your nose, that's your nasal bone. Okay, and then the bottom part of your nose here is the vomer. Okay, and then your final bone, which doesn't want to stay attached, is your mandible. Okay, now some more bone markings that you need to know. Okay, on the frontal bone, there's this little crack right here called the glabella. You need to know him. Then you also have supraorbital foramen. So supra is above, orbital is your eye socket. So there should be a foramen, there should be a hole at the top of each of these, but they're very hard to see on our model. Easier to see is this infraorbital foramen, which are the holes down here below the orbit or the eye socket. Okay. In here, there's an optic canal. So I don't know if you can see that, but it's that hole right here. That's the optic canal that's in the sphenoid bone. There's one on either side in there. Okay. And then the last one on the front is the mental foramen. Let's see if I can do this and hold it. These two dots down here on the mandible. Okay. Now, as we flip them over to the side, I'm going to take that away for a second so we can see a little bit better. Okay, so we had our temporal bone here, and we have our zygomatic bone up here. This part is still part of the temporal bone, but it's called the zygomatic process of the temporal bone. Okay, so it connects the temporal to the zygomatic. So there's a zygomatic process of the temporal bone. Okay, you'll also see your external acoustic meatus or external auditory meatus. That's where sound enters through your ear. There's this large bump right here called the mastoid process, where a bunch of your muscles for mastication or chewing attach. Okay, and there's the styloid process. I think of it like a stylus, like a pen. Okay, and so it's pointy. So that's a styloid process. Okay. Then on our mandible, we have our mandibular condyle, and he's going to fit into our mandibular fossa. which I guess I should pick up this and show you. So as he fits in here, those two holes that they fit into are the mandibular fossa, okay? But on the mandible itself is the mandibular condyle, okay? There's also the coronoid process right here. Your alveolar margins, you have this both on the mandible and the maxilla, but that's just that little ridge where the teeth are joined, okay? The mental foramen, we've already talked about that. Those are these little holes down here, okay? And then the last thing I want to show you from this view is on the back. Okay, so this is our occipital bone, and our external occipital protuberance is this enlargement right here. And you should be able to feel in the back of your head and feel that external occipital protuberance. Okay, so that covers all of the outside. The next video is going to be the bottom.